You remember what happened as we talked about the passage just before last week. These three angels, beings, persons, showed up. They began to talk with Abraham. At first, we don't know who they are. We finally found out that at least one of them is the very manifestation of God. And the Lord begins to speak to him. He says, listen, by this time next year, you're going to have a child. You're going to have a son. And Sarah, who's listening in the tent, begins to laugh. And the Lord confronts her and said, why'd you laugh? And she said, I did not laugh. And he says, yes, you did laugh. And a year later, that son's born. His name is Isaac, which means he laughs. God's going to have the last laugh. He can do far more than we could ever possibly imagine. And he will do what he wants to do in our lives. At any rate, as these three men get up, one of which we now know is God himself, the story continues in verse 16. When the men got up to leave, they looked down towards Sodom. Now, this city came up a little earlier. Remember that Abraham's nephew Lot had gone to live there. They looked down towards Sodom, and Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way. Then the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him. For I've chosen him, so that he'll direct his children and his household after him, to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. Then the Lord said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin is so grievous, that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know. Now, it may just be worth pointing out here, from Genesis chapter 3 forward, where there's a break in community, where there's a distance, there's an isolation between human beings and God, and human beings and each other. God's whole work moving forward is to put that all back together, to bring people back into relationship with him and each other. And it's certainly interesting to note here that there's this very open, free-flowing relationship between God and Abraham now. God showed up, he says, I'm going to be your God, you're going to be mine, you belong to me. And it's very interesting, he's saying, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? I mean, he's like deliberating, hey, he's my friend. And as you read forward in the Bible, there's several places where Abraham's actually called a friend of God. It's just interesting to note that. Verse 22 says this, the men turned away and went towards Sodom. And we find out that these two men, as we read forward, are actually angels. They go toward that city. But Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Then Abraham approached him and said, will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in that city? Will you really sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of 50 righteous people in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you. Will not the judge of all the earth do right? So Abraham says, listen, if there are 50 people in that town who are righteous, who love God, who have faith, who are full of mercy and grace, are you really going to wipe everyone out together? Far be it from you, God, to do such a thing. 50 people, that's the size of a small town. The Lord responds and says, if I find 50 people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake. Then, verse 27, Abraham spoke up again. Now that I've been so bold as to speak to the Lord, though I am nothing but dust and ashes, what if the number of righteous is 5 less than 50? Will you destroy the whole city because of 5 people? God responds, if I find 45 there, I will not destroy it. Once again, Abraham spoke to him, what if only 40 are found there? He said, for the sake of 40, I will not do it. Then Abraham says, may the Lord not be angry, but let me speak. What if only 30 can be found there? He answered, I will not do it if I find 30 there. Abraham said, now that I've been so bold as to speak to the Lord, what if only 20 can be found there? He said, for the sake of 20, I'll not destroy it. Then he said, may the Lord not be angry, but let me speak just once more. What if only 10 can be found there? And he answered, for the sake of 10, I will not destroy it. When the Lord had finished speaking with Abraham, he left, and Abraham returned home. Now, this passage, I think, raises a whole ton of questions, which I want to try and just begin to unpack with a couple of ideas, just make a couple of observations. The first observation I make is this, that it seems Abraham has here a conviction that righteousness is contagious, that it's catching. It's interesting the question that he doesn't ask, especially in light of what's happened in world history up to this point. There's just a few chapters before this one, the story of Noah. You remember the story of Noah, right? The wickedness on earth had become so great that God decides he's going to just start over and destroy the whole thing. But there is one man and his family who are righteous, Noah and his family. And so what God does in that story, he destroys everything else, but he rescues Noah and his family from that situation before he destroys the entire earth. And it could be that Abraham had gone to God and he said, well, wait a second, what if there are 50 people around that city? Wouldn't you first take them out before you destroy all those wicked people there? Well, that's not the question he asks. He says, what if there are 50 righteous people there? You wouldn't just destroy them together, would you? He then begins to count down. How about 45? How about 40? How about 30? How about 20? How about 10? And I think underlying his question is this idea, which he has, and the question is this, that godliness, righteousness, faith, grace, forgiveness, mercy are things that are contagious. They're catching. He has this idea, if there are 50 people there who follow you, God, who know about love and forgiveness and righteousness and mercy, then maybe there's hope for that whole city despite how wicked they are now. Maybe one at a time, they'll start to be taken into the community of those who might be described as righteous. Maybe if there's 45, maybe there's 40. There's hope because righteousness is catching. This, by the way, is an idea that I think Abraham has that sometimes we actually think the opposite about. We have this idea that if we were to take something that's clean and something that's dirty and mix them all together, that the dirt would be the thing that would become contagious and the clean thing would become dirty. Isn't that normally our idea? It's interesting when Jesus shows up on the scene, he has a very different way of describing things. He says of his people, you are the light of the world. Does darkness rub off on light? Or is it the other way around? Think about that. There's a story we read just this last week, if you were here, from the Gospel of Mark. It was of this woman who had been bleeding for 12 years. Now, in the culture of her day, if she was bleeding like that, she would have been a person who would have been considered unclean, someone who needed to go away from other people.